Hello, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to the Information Challenge in Medical Research webcast. During the next hour, Tim Heiges, EBSCO's VP of Discovery Innovation for Medical Institutions, will help us understand how a discovery platform can deliver better access to the information that counts when it counts. Tim Heiges has long been a highly active participant and advocate in the library industry during his tenure with EBSCO for the past 16 years. In addition to being a regular speaker at numerous regional, national, and international library and publisher conferences, he has also served as a guest lecturer for 14 years at numerous information science schools. Tim also works closely with librarians from Yale University, Drake University, and others as part of a formal library advisory council. Enjoy the presentation from Tim. We will have a Q&A at the end, and you can submit your questions via the chat or Q&A box. This webinar will be recorded and posted to our blog at discovery.ebsco.com/pulse and sent to all registrants. And now here's Tim.
Rachel, thank you very much. And on behalf of all of EBSCO, thanks to all of the attendees who are joining us today from not only here in the United States, but around the world. As Rachel mentioned, my name is Tim Heiges, and I am the Vice President of Discovery Innovation for Medical Libraries with EBSCO. And in the number of years that I've had the opportunity to work with librarians from all facets, whether it is medical librarians or academic or corporate or public or school, there is an evolving way of how end users, really that greater society, that the two of us work with, either as vendor and as library, which is ultimately that researcher. And with the Information Challenge and dealing specifically with medical research, and in talking with medical librarians, we've shared with one another on how there has been this evolution of being able to find the critical information that's out there, whether it is in the library specifically or whether it is outside of the library, but being able to find the content that is needed. That's really where the challenge lies in medical libraries. Because you as a librarian and as an evaluator of your resources for your particular library, you have purchased individual content pieces based upon the strengths of your library. And each of these individual content pieces, whether they are databases or whether they are e-journal sets or e-packages or e-books or your catalog, they all have their assets and their liabilities. But the result ends up being a kind of a fragmented landscape that really requires end users, whomever they are, whether they are professional researchers, whether they are nurses, whether they are doctors, whether they are patients or even visitors, being able to find out the critical content that they need. So as Rachel mentioned, we want to share with you today how you can find the critical content for which you're looking from whatever perspective you're looking at it from. So I don't come to you today as a salesperson or as a service person. I really come to you today as a consultant and how this service can really help your end users, that greater society that the two of us serve, get the critical content that they're looking for. And so looking at the value chain in a library, we came across this article. And it really kind of summarizes perfectly the goal of any library. And it says, and this is written in the Journal of Supply Chain Management, but the key to the library's success is its ability to effectively and economically deliver services and information that users value. And so we think about this in the space of course, databases, but also in the space of that greater society. And how can we take the ability to serve that greater society? But we really need to kind of step back and look at how end users have evolved over the years, how research has evolved over the years, and how results are returned inside of an interface over the course of years. So the temptation with EBSCO hosts being in 185,000 libraries worldwide is to really study our own interface. But it ends up being limiting because that is just one individual interface of the many interfaces that are out there. So we don't want to necessarily pigeonhole a user or a researcher in a particular format because they might not want exactly what the singular EBSCO host interface provides. Certainly we look at search logs and we have advisory boards and we have user group studies. We've worked historically with Kent State University, with the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, their usability labs. We've worked with third-party usability study groups too. And we understand that there is a broader landscape that's out there that end user needs to get the content and have that digital landscape of discovery and research from a particular starting point, and we need to adapt to that. So by doing that, by shaping the way that the user interfaces with the front end, we need to make sure that we're there to meet that. But we also have to think about not only the design of the interface and the interaction with the interface, but also the hospital or the library's portion of really marketing themselves as the information hub of that larger hospital or that larger system, or even if you a medical university of that larger university. So we need to understand that that researcher knows about the service and knows that it does exist and that it returns effective results for my critical research. And so if you think about it in, zooming out in really everyday life, there are 1,000 decisions that need to be made. So for example, how did you get to work today? Well, I drove here. Well, fair enough. You left from home, and the challenge is going from point A to point B that you do 5-6 days a week. You're making very, very many micro decisions about how you got from point A to point B. Did you turn right out of the driveway or out of the road versus turning left across 4 lanes of traffic? Is it raining outside? Did you hear an advertisement on the radio that advertised the coffee shop, so you decided to stop off and get coffee at an unusual place? All of these little micro decisions that you make about simply your mode of transportation that you've done hundreds of times is exactly the way that research is done in an environment as well. So historically, because we've been fortunate enough as an industry to live through the era of individual databases, migrating from the old print resources, but into what was the first generation of discovery services, and then we were able to develop the next generation of discovery services, many libraries are still setting up access to their content in this individual way. So this is my front end for the library. Am I a physician? Am I a pharmacist? Am I a nurse? Am I a patient? Well, if I'm any of those demographics or researchers, then from there, the landscape is tailored for that individual researcher. But if I am wanting to access all sorts of different types of resources, then I come to a page like this, which is broken down by either discipline and by alpha, but there's 60 some odd different ways of getting into the particular research. So how do I make these micro decisions based upon my search, whether it is simplistic, 1 word, 2 words, or whether it is broad, like it's an exact search? How do I find where I need to go to find the critical access content for which I'm looking in a very quick, concise way? So we think about that, and we think about the metadata that's underneath it. We think about the access points for these individual content pieces. but really how can we shape that user experience so if I'm working as a team or if I'm working as an individual researcher, that I want to be able to not only get to that content, but also have access to the search results page, which really ends up being the ultimate place where researchers are not necessarily seeing that as a gateway to X or Y as full text. Certainly they do that, but they also make those many micro decisions from the result page, and it's really ultimately a destination. So as a vendor, what we have to do is we have to ensure that when those results are returned from the strength of the metadata and from the strength of the relevancy algorithm altogether, that result list page provides that researcher the opportunity to get to that critical content for which they are looking. So they're making many results, or many decisions based upon the results. And that's what makes the metadata that's underneath the result list and the result list itself the most effective way of having end users be able to get to that critical content. So those decisions are made from the result list altogether. And so we have a user research group which conducts independent studies based upon your users, based upon users in medical universities, in hospitals, in critical access hospitals, in academic libraries, in school libraries. And there's these universal truths that happen with all end users, irrespective of where they come from. They all want to do a very broad search. So the example that I'm showing here is Ebola virus. But we find out that when they use this result list page, they're actually looking for it to be very efficient. They're skimming for their keywords, and they're looking for the full text, because ultimately they want to be able to get to that full text of that particular article. So this is where the relevancy algorithm and the result list altogether becomes essential to the research process. Because I've searched Ebola virus and I want to find all sorts of information on it. Now, the end user might be searching the disease itself, studies of the disease, symptoms of the disease, but it might be a visitor of a patient who is diagnosed with Ebola virus and they don't know really much about it. So we need to make sure that we anticipate that user intent and show them a result list page that gives them not only broad overviews, but also very specific articles and even catalog entries dealing with, in this particular case, the Ebola virus, but also make it simple enough so that if I want the full text, if I want to come from this result list page and go into the full text, it's very clear and it's concise listed on this page because of those skimmers and because of the way that they efficiently seek the content. So in talking with librarians, really kind of historically as EDS Discovery Health has been released, we find that there is a romantic notion that all end users are taking an article title and they're searching on that and they're searching specifically for that particular article title. But when we actually look at the overall search logs, what we did here with this one-week sample of all EBSCO Discovery Service searches. Now, EBSCO Discovery Service is in 8,000 libraries worldwide. And so we did a cross-section of the top searches. And these were the top searches. So what do you notice about this? Not only is it very simplistic searches, 1, 2 words, but it's also very broad, and it's also finding that researchers are treating the search box like they would a general search engine. EBSCO and libraries have historically treated the search box as a reference tool. So I would come in as a researcher to do my research on the Ebola virus or on Lassa fever or whatever I'm researching, and be very specific about it and find resources in the library. But as individual researchers have stepped out of the role as academic or medical researchers, they have treated search boxes as almost, I want to search anything, and so how is this returned? And this is where you see search terms like Facebook, or search terms like PubMed, or search terms like JSTOR are coming in and they're asking that search box a question. So we as a discovery service developer have to be sure that we anticipate that user intent. So if I'm asking for the hours and location of the library in what the search box typically defines as a reference tool, you don't want results, the end user doesn't want results based upon the terms hours and locations. They want to know the hours and the locations of the library in the hospital or on the campus. So we have to be able to take those searches and anticipate that user intent so that end user gets exactly what they need from your library's resource. And so now we come back to the main page and we have our broad search of medical marijuana, and we're familiar with resources like PubMed. So we're going to go into PubMed with all of its strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to do research on medical marijuana. But we bring back results, and they may be what we're looking for, but they may not be what we're looking for. So then I need to come back to this page. I can go back into PubMed, or I can go into the Ask Mayo Expert, or I can go into Cinol Plus, and so on and so on and so forth. You have now not only these resources that are available and that I can make decisions on, but also there's a whole collection of e-journals listed from A to Z to which the library subscribes, or e-books now on top of that, and in your catalog. So now I have to take my search, replicate it 50, 60 times, if not more, to find out just the information for what I'm looking, irrespective of where it's coming from. I know the library has this because the library has purchased great content, either in database form or e-journal packages or what have you, because that's what the information resources are all about. But I just need to be able to find the content. So we find that many libraries worldwide, 8,000 to date, have moved to something like EDS Discovery Health and retained all of those resources, but actually moved them into an approachable interface so that I, as a researcher, can come in here, look at the library's front page, and see almost front and center a very simple search box that allows you to know exactly what you're doing with the library. It basically redefines the virtual front door of the library, so you're allowed to not only see that search box as approachable as any sort of search engine, but behind the scenes, what we're able to do with EDS Discovery Health is give the library and give the researcher more control over the subject headings, in contrast to how other general search engines or even first-generation discovery services leverage bodies of full text and bring back results that can be ineffective. So looking at medical libraries, looking at the changing face of medical libraries, we did a sample of how medical libraries have changed over time, but largely their researchers have shaped the way that collection is done. And so with this, what we did is we took a medical library that is associated with a university, but it also supports a large hospital. And so in the university, there's 10,000 full-time enrolled. The library employs 50 librarians, And collectively, with the university hospital and the hospital it supports, there are just over 1,300 beds available. So in the past, this library had 160 print volumes. It had nearly 5,000 print serials that they made available. Their circulation was vibrant, vigorous, over 100,000. And then they had acquired databases very similar to what you saw on the previous screen a couple screens ago with all those access points. And I would go into the native interface, or even if we look way back, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, we had federated searches, which were big at the time, but you were still beholden to the algorithms and the intricacies of those particular databases, which had its own inherent challenges. But then as time evolved, print budgets remained flat or really with no growth whatsoever. So there wasn't as much or as vigorous acquisition for the print volumes. So it remained static at 160,000. Circulation for print materials declined by 50%. Monographs were still purchased, some, but some were purchased print, some were purchased electronic, but those really remained flat. But then ebooks began to increase, and e-journal packages, regardless of whether it's coming from a CLUR or an LWW or whatever, were being purchased. And then they purchased a discovery service, so that focus now is really on this column now, which is the discovery service, and being able to bring in all of these pieces of content, whether it is by re-indexing them in a base index or making that result list as inclusive as possible. So nearly regardless of where this resource is coming from, I'm able to get to the content that the library provides or even that the hospital provides, because we can incorporate policies and procedures, things like that, that are unique to the hospital, but not necessarily unique to the library, that makes that result list inclusive. So it really calls for a new technology solution for that society that we serve, which is ultimately the researcher. So in your professional, as you have your professional evaluator's hat on, and you're looking at discovery services kind of across the board, and there are a few of them out there in the marketplace. How do you really decide on what my library wants to accomplish and bringing in the amount of content that I have in my library to make it accessible for that critical access content that researchers need? So at the Charleston conference, and I'm sure a few of you were there as well in last November, and Esther Onega from the University of Virginia had a panel that she was talking about, as well as she did this presentation a couple of months ago with Marshall Breeding, who is an industry consultant. And in her evaluation, in her and her committee's evaluation of a discovery service there at the University of Virginia, they went through the process of re-evaluating discovery services because their previous discovery service was not meeting the bill for their researchers. So she and her committee got together and like, how do we decide on the best thing that will help accomplish for all of the libraries on the University of Virginia campus? How do we best decide what discovery service is going to be the most effective? Let's break it down into a few different criteria. So there's functionality. Well, we need to ensure that it's quick, and we need to ensure that the results that come back are relevant. Because if end users are putting in their search of Facebook, or they're putting in their search of phrenic nerve damage, you don't want results to return greater than really 3 seconds. So we need to evaluate on how quickly all of this content to which the University of Virginia subscribes comes back quickly and comes back in a relevant way. So what about the metadata? So when I take that search term of phrenic nerve damage, What are those three search terms searching against? Is it searching against the bodies of full text? Is it searching against the subject heading? Is it searching against the article titles? What is it exactly searching? What about coverage? So the University of Virginia, just like all of your libraries, you have unique pieces of content that are tailored for your hospital, tailored for your library, tailored for your university, that you and your colleagues have made decisions on. What of those holdings and how are they covered inside of the Discovery Service are going to be returned the results when I do my search? What about relevancy? So, looking at the actual algorithm itself, what in this result list that comes back, how relevant are the results? And that lends itself to really point 2 and point 3 as well. What about quality control? Does it reflect the library holdings altogether? Well, okay, so this is all on the user end, on the user experience side, but what about on the library side? How is the customer service? Because I can't just turn on a Discovery Service and then let it go. It's something that needs to be almost a working order that is a back and forth between the library and the customer service team, so that as the library evolves and grows, we need to ensure that our customer service group is consistent and is knowledgeable so that they can help us for however way our researchers evolve. And then the University of Virginia did something that's not necessarily unique, but is certainly different in the way that libraries are interfacing with a discovery service. They chose to use the API. So one of their criterion was making sure that this discovery service had an aggressive API so that they could take all of the raw data to which their discovery service provides and manipulate it and move it into their own interface. So they did not necessarily want a vendor's interface, they wanted to design their own. So by utilizing and having this seventh criterion, they wanted to make sure that the API was strong enough and effective enough for ingestion into their own site. And so that brings us back to the simple search box and the approachable search box. That, yeah, there's a lot of content that's out there that in this particular case, Massachusetts General Hospital purchases and subscribes to, whether it is catalog content or databases or e-journals or e-books or regardless. All of the content can be found underneath this page, but it doesn't dissolve those individual silos that they've created and honed over the years by purchasing all these individual pieces. But the researcher, that greater society, wants to be able to come in through that virtual front door of the library and access the content in one concise place. So you still have, by either discipline or by subject, or even by alpha, this list of resources to which Massachusetts General subscribes. You've got that approachable interface so that end user knows that they can get their resources, that critical content for which they're looking, right on that front page. A.T. Still College of Osteopathic Medicine in Arizona and Missouri, they did something similar, but also something really unique. Whereas when you come into their libraries page, you have the option for the search box, and they made it something clever. They call it still one search. So they're bringing in the incorporation of the name of the university, but also saying it's one search, so you have one opportunity to get in there and get the results that you need. But they've also created what we've seen a lot from libraries around the world with a tabbed version for individual content pieces. So historically, end users have come in and they've searched an up-to-date or they've searched a PubMed. the librarians there at the university don't want to take that away from them. They really want to showcase these resources as well. And those tabbed resources can be created for any number of different types of content. But on their Still One search, what they've done is they've created individual disciplines, and in those radio buttons beside them, they've incorporated check marks that are specific towards the College of Osteopathic Medicine. One of the great benefits of being at AT Still is that they not only purchase resources that are specific towards the osteopathic medicine, but by being in 2 states, they are also recipients of the respective consortial purchases from Arizona and from Missouri. So they get many, many multidisciplinary databases that can be incorporated inside of their base index, but they've tailored this front page so that if I'm a nursing student for osteopathic medicine and I want to come into this virtual front door, I don't have to deal with content that's coming from a school library in Missouri that is going to be completely independent of my research. They've been able to tailor the content, tailor the knowledge base, tailor the base index so that I can come in, I can do my search on phrenic nerve damage, and it's not going to give me something from a database or even a e-magazine or e-journal that's independent of my discipline altogether. So given that, given the design of the interface, as a vendor, we need to ensure that not only the design is there, the flexibility lending to Ms. Omega's 7 criteria for evaluation of content, but also support the access to all the resources in really these 6 fundamental ways. And these 6 fundamental ways have come out of our ongoing dialogues with our advisory boards, whether it is our medical advisory board, whether it is our academic advisory board, we have a software advisory board, but also conversations with all of our library partners around the world as we grew and developed this next generation discovery service and had these 6 fundamental ways to make sure that for medical libraries, because really in no other profession is critical content more essential to the research than in medical libraries, we have to make sure that content is accessible not only on the first page, but quite frankly about the phone as those results are returned. So make sure that there's quick access available to it. We need to make sure that there's always relevant and current results. If you look at our search logs, and as our user research team does this, in any given database, the last 12 months of that particular database is the most searched content in contrast to the entire legacy content found in that particular database or in those particular databases. Does the legacy content have value? Absolutely, absolutely. But if you look at the search logs, our end users are looking at this last 12 months of content. So if we can make sure that all of the content that comes back is current and is relevant, which is blending to the relevancy algorithm, that's going to make it a much more effective research experience for that end user. We also need to make sure that there's increased availability and usage of the library's resources. As we saw in those previous screens with all of those different access points, there could be access points that are buried on the side of the page that don't get access only because of where they are placed on the page, but it could be very effective. Or maybe a library subscribes to something that is listed in alpha order and has, maybe it starts with an X or maybe it starts with a Z. End users don't want to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page to find something that starts with an X or a Z. They want it to be right there. to have it right there. So if we can increase that visibility and dissolve those individual silos of those resources and bring it into one interface, it allows the user to garner those results coming from that database or that e-journal set that happens to start with a Z. We also, in developing the next generation discovery service, we knew that there were libraries and even hospitals, because a lot of times there are IT departments, there are CMOs, there are CNOs, who are all involved in this decision-making behind the information gateway for the library. But they don't subscribe to just database content. They want to bring in policies and procedures for the larger hospital, or EMRs, or EHRs, or any sort of maybe an existing intranet. What we've done behind the scenes and how we've grown, evolved this next generation discovery service is by incorporating those policies and procedures into the result list, because that end user sees that result list as a destination and not necessarily as a gateway to X and Y. We also want to be sure to customize different profiles for different groups of users. Many, many times, and I've alone this week, I've had probably 5 or 6 presentations to large hospital groups for EDS Discovery Health, and these hospital groups have satellite locations, whether they're a cancer care center, whether they're a family care center, or a radiological center. What we can do with EDS Discovery Health is actually tailor the content for that radiological center or for that cancer center that's sitting out in a suburb somewhere, so that if I'm just looking for cancer-centric content to which the library subscribes, that base index, that knowledge base is tailored for just that specific demographic. We have many libraries with whom we speak that have a patient library there on the campus of the hospital altogether, or maybe to have a visitor kiosk. That demographic, those patients and those visitors, read at a different level than the researchers there. So we can tailor that content. There's no additional charge for any of this, but we can tailor that profile for that specific user. But we also bring in the subject indexing, and we are true to that native metadata coming from those respective services, whether it's a CINAHL or a Medline or a PsycInfo. We harness 100% of that native metadata with the mesh headings, with the CINAHL headings, with those APA headings, all coming in from those respective resources. And that's how we leverage the result lists as the end user searches it. So we've got to make sure to understand that whether we have customized a profile for a different group of users, or I'm starting as a professional researcher and I start very, very broad, we need to understand that user intent. Because as you saw from the search, the sample searches done last year, end users are really all over the place looking at the library search box as a general front end, but libraries needing it as a reference front end. So we leverage this user intent by taking that search of either medical marijuana or phrenic nerve damage or whatever it is, and in contrast to the first generation discovery services, which leverage that algorithm against bodies of full text, we take a completely different philosophy because of how end users need effective results returned, not only on that first page, but on above the fold. So we'll take that search for phrenic nerve damage, we'll match on subject headings from those controlled vocabularies. So preserving that native metadata from those services, from the PsycInfos, from the Medlines, those lexicographers have worked on that index or those indexes for 50, 60 years. There is content in there that is essential to that particular discipline. We need to understand that if we preserve that native metadata, that end user gets a better effective result list that comes back because I'm searching phrenic nerve damage from that controlled vocabulary, not from the bodies of full text, where phrenic could be on page 7, nerve on page 14, and damage on page 19, which ultimately has nothing to do with phrenic nerve damage. They're just random words spread throughout the bodies of full text. So we'll match on those subject headings. And then hierarchically down, we'll match on the article titles. And then we'll match on author-supplied keywords. Many of you in the audience have written professional development articles, and the publisher has asked you for your keywords that are associative with that longer body of text. And there are keywords that you provide that you feel that that subject or that term is essential to your larger body of work. And that term may or may not be covered in the body of work, but you feel it essential because you know more about that article than anyone else. That's why they asked you, or that's why you were commissioned, or that's why you decided to write that article on this particular subject. So as you search the phrenic nerve damage, and you find it in the subject headings, and then hierarchically down, this is a keyword that you've given to the publisher, given for that abstract. Now I'm able to find this article written on phrenic nerve damage, which may have been lost if you're leveraging only full text. And then hierarchically down, we'll match on keywords found within the abstract. And then if there's really nothing else that's available on that particular subject area, or even for book chapters where we're not getting the indexing from the publisher for whatever reason, we'll match them on the full text, but then there's also a proximity search found in there. So that if you're searching a phrenic nerve damage, and phrenic is on page 7, and nerve, and so on and so forth, spread throughout the full text, it's going to be lower in the result list versus phrenic nerve damage found within the bodies of full text. So this relevancy ranking is one of the things that we're really proud of. And we're also really proud that it's never going to be perfected because that researcher, whether they are at your library or whether they're at a library around the world, those researchers collectively will always be growing and evolving. And we have a team of, I would say, 25 or so working on this relevancy algorithm so that those end users can make sure that it's always going to be effective result list return. And so in showing you kind of screenshots and how effective this can be, what we've done is we've kind of called a grouping of screenshots that show you the effective way of being able to access this content. But we've got, with the 8,000 libraries around the world accessing the Discovery service, there's probably about 2,600 or so different versions of the interface. And the one that you see here is really one of the most broad, but also one of the most approachable, where the headers are yours, the footers are yours. The idea is really that the discovery experience doesn't belong to an EBSCO, it belongs to the library. And so by customizing each this, we really let each library walk at their own pace and really tailor it by the environment to which you ultimately serve that researcher. So with this, in this profile here, we've included featured topics, we've included an ebook carousel, we've included individual search boxes for points of care tools, and even individual things like Isabel that are popular among researchers, so I can go right into Isabel and do search just in that specific database. Or this library has incorporated the ebooks, the popular ebooks that they want to, because EDS Discovery Health loads those book jacket images in there. If I'm a visual learner, now I can get to the content on pediatric heart failure because I recognize from the result list when I was doing research a few days ago that pediatric heart failure book was the exact one I was searching for. So we did a search on sympathetic nervous system, and really with this, what I wanted to show here is how we leverage that search term or those search terms against the controlled vocabularies, against the subject headings, against the author-supplied keywords, and what have you. So there are 235,000 results that have been returned on this particular search. There were no limiters put on it, so it's a search that's searching across the entire knowledge base of EDS Discovery Health. How do we bring that back? Well, we bring that back by leveraging those search terms and incorporating the sympathetic nervous system from the result list altogether. So you see here that it's not only found in the article title, but it's also found in the subject heading as well as the author-supplied keywords. And then on the right-hand side, if your hospital is, promoting patient-centered, physician-led, team-based care, all of the tools on the right-hand side are incorporated for that team to really benefit from the collaboration of their complementary skills. By incorporating all the list of the individual e-journals to which a library subscribes, by bringing in your A to Z list and a link resolver, you can search not only on the individual names of the journals, but also on the short names. So we've searched here J-viral. Well, those are two really abstract terms, but the search engine knows that you're searching the Journal of Virology, and right there in the placard area, we incorporate your full run of the Journal of Virology that you have for your collection. Discovery services early on, the first generations of them, were really criticized for not having exact matches. So I know the name of the article, but the first generations were pulling out stop words and leveraging the keywords. So what we've done as a next generation discovery service is ensure that if I have an article title, the disinfection of Staphylococcus aureus and so on and so forth, if I put that in my search box altogether, that there's only one result that's come back, and it's the exact result that I'm looking for because I took that search term from the article and searched it rather than searching disinfection, Staphylococcus aureus, indoor aerosols, and then pulling out those stop words of in. We also have developed the search by PubMed identifier. So I have an article, I know the PMID, all I want to do is come into this front end, put in these individual numbers, but it's a PMID. And where it's found inside of your library's resources, we found it. So, for example, this library gets both Medline with full text and Cinol with full text, and there are the same articles found inside of there because we're searching on the PubMed ID, and both those articles are found in there. We've identified it and brought back 3 results rather than searching on these random numbers altogether. This is a great example of what Helios, which is a hospital group in Germany of about 100 individual rehab facilities, they have a great entry. So up in the top right-hand corner is their search box, but they've included large buttons for those end users on how to get into the content. And with this, what they didn't want to do is load their own content, but they wanted to highlight the exact match placard and really customize it, and then the number of results on the button widget on the right-hand side. So if you look closely, and it's a little blurry on this particular screen, if you look closely on the right, this resource has come back for these books. There are 8, the end user knows that there are 8 resources from this customized Helios collection, and then 5 for the other one as well. For this hospital group, which is a group in the Netherlands, and I promise you I tried to pronounce this, but I just could not pronounce it correctly, but it's a hospital group in the Netherlands. What they wanted to do was they wanted to make sure that there are clear full text and interlibrary loan buttons for this. They also wanted to showcase the individual apps or widgets to Google Books, to PubMed, to UpToDate. But with this interlibrary loan form, making sure that that end user knows if they don't hold the rights to the full text for this particular article, there's a customized interlibrary loan form that's spawned once they click on that result in the list altogether. They also created a widget to the PubMed clinical queries. So if they wanted to display any systematic reviews, if they wanted to filter citations for specific categories, the end user could easily do that but not have to leave the result list altogether because it's right there on that opening page. And that's really how we incorporated content from a non-partner. There is no discovery service out there, including EDS Discovery Health, that can incorporate everything inside of a base index simply because all publishers do not play well with discovery services. As a philosophy, we feel it should be an inclusive interface rather than an exclusive interface. So this is how we incorporate by building apps or widgets to that content that's not 100% covered inside of the base index. Clinical Key, an Elsevier product, we have the rights to all of the Elsevier e-journals and e-books inside of our base index, but there are reports and continuing education modules and other ephemera that Elsevier has not turned over the rights to for any discovery service. So rather than keep those outside of the interface, we feel that we should incorporate them inside there. So if that end user wants to do their research on dental hygiene, all they have to do is click Clinical Key and bring back those results on that particular resource. So by incorporating that, we've also incorporated links out to the native interface. That brings up this PubMed link. So if I want to search PubMed and I know that that content is found inside of the index, but I want those native limiters and expanders, we've created a link right from the result list that takes you to those individual limiters. For a lot of those libraries that want something broad, what we've done as well is in EDS Discovery Health, you have the option of turning on research starters. There's no additional charge for that either, but there's nearly 70,000 of these research starters that are written by PhDs that are coming from medical guides and medical encyclopedia, but are broad overviews on these 68,000 topics. I can come in here, if my grandfather was just diagnosed with diabetes, I don't know what diabetes is, search diabetes at the visitor kiosk or at the patient library or the family library, search diabetes, and it's an approachable way of explaining what diabetes is all about. As I mentioned, we load the database short names, we load the acronyms. So if I want to search JAMA and not the Journal of the American Medical Association, I can incorporate that, and it's put right in this placard area so I can easily get into it. We also noticed that in search logs, end users search names of databases. You saw with JSTOR and with Facebook and PubMed. Those aren't necessarily legitimate search terms for a reference tool, but they also are names of essential resources. If you come in, if I'm an end user and I come into a search box and I search Web of Science, we don't want results returned on Web and Science, we want it returned on the actual database itself. So again, in that placard area, we incorporate the actual database and the link to Web of Science. Here we see what MIT has done with the hours and the locations. So they were finding their end users were walking in and typing in library hours. What are the library hours? Right there, front and center, are the actual library hours of these particular libraries. We can incorporate your catalog into this. So this catalog, you have one, is an essential part of your collection. If you think back to that medical library screen from a few screens ago, they have 100,000 plus print volumes. That is essential for any type of content found inside of the catalog. We ingest the catalog in there. If all of your clinical key titles are incorporated as MARC records inside of your catalog, because we've loaded that, now everything found in clinical key can be incorporated inside of the base index. And we work with nearly 50 ILS providers around the world and work with any number of different individual catalog pieces for, whether it's coming from a CERC product like an EOS or even Sydney Plus in Canada, cyber tools, innovative, and so on and so forth, even open access resources like a Viewfind. And here's how the catalog result looks. So we've done a search on heart disease. We built an iframe in here that tells you this is where the book is found. Is it on the science library on the 4th floor? There's live updates for it, so we have all the call numbers, we have the status of it, if it's a circulating book, and can tell that end user where it's actually located. But what if you wanted to go a step further and actually find out where this particular book is found? Maybe your library is large and it's buried somewhere in the stacks. What this library did is they incorporated a map as well as a text call number to their phone, so that not only can I walk to where this book is found, but I also, if I'm going to do research later on, I can have it texted to me and then access it later. Videos are incorporated inside of there. So if you're looking for video content, or maybe I'm a nurse working on my RN or working on my LPN, and I find that there are videos that the library has access to, again, we can incorporate those into the result list, whether they're coming from a MedCom or they're coming from an Alexander Street Press or Films on Demand. There's a lot of resources with which we can work to incorporate that content. We also provide an opportunity so that you don't have to rebuild these apps or these widgets, but we provide it as almost a store, if you will, for you, that you can go in and you can see the nearly 200 apps that we've created and that have been created by our library partners, so that if you want to highlight individual content pieces, or maybe you want to build a library chat button inside of the interface, or maybe one library has done a recommended resource when too many results have come back, and how do I help narrow this? So we've incorporated video for a training guide done by the library to help them shake down their search results, or if there are too few in contrast, to expand the result list. So there's a lot that we can do with the App Store, with building in those widgets to ensure that this is an inclusive experience for all that critical content to which your library subscribes. Because at the essence, EDS Discovery Health helps accomplish the mission that was laid down by Carla Funk, the Executive Director at the Medical Library Association, in a publication that came out last year called Against the Grain. And she said that the MLA believes that the key elements in improved health for all peoples are the ability of each nation to strengthen and build health sciences information capacity through qualified health sciences librarians, that's you guys, implementation of support technologies, that would be EDS Discovery Health, next generation discovery service, as well as access to quality information. That is the content that you have purchased, that you have honed, that you have tailored for your library to help your hospital or to help the medical university accomplish the mission of the larger body altogether. So we, with EDS Discovery Health, can help you help that greater society that the two of us will always serve, and help accomplish the mission that the MLA and the other governing bodies of medical libraries around the world have established. It makes it easier for that end user, irrespective of where they're coming from, whether they are a team, whether they are an individual physician, whether they are a professional researcher like you, or a nurse practitioner, or a patient, or a visitor. We need to ensure that that meets that greater society and serve them in a result list that is effective for that research that's done. So I thank you very much. I would like to turn it back over to Rachel because I see a number of questions that have come in. I've also included my email address here, so if there are questions that you might have that come up offline, please do not hesitate to email me directly. Your time has been a gift today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. That was awesome. So we do have a couple questions that have come in. First, can you clarify what API is?
Yes, the API is almost as useless as an acronym to remember as a URL. But what the API essentially does is we would turn over all of the raw metadata. So we take your knowledge base of all your tailored content and turn over this raw metadata. Your programmers or you as the administrator of this interface allows with the API for you to tailor your own algorithm or you to tailor your own interface. Or maybe you want to use, say, an open access catalog, maybe like what you find, or maybe like a there are a number of them out there. There's Blackboard, and there's all sorts of other open access or even LMS systems. We, with the API, we turn over that raw metadata so that you can create your own interface and algorithm, really tailor it to what your institution needs.
Great, thank you for the clarification. And this next question comes from Amy. Our custom ILL form doesn't always return the PubMed ID. Since we primarily use the PubMed ID to request articles from other libraries, is it possible to get the custom form to always populate the PubMed ID?
It is my understanding that you are able to write that in as a rule inside of the ILL form, inside of the administrative module of EDS Discovery Health. That is really a question more for your discovery service coordinator and how that's actually done, because in working with libraries with EDS Discovery Health over its course of being released, this is the first time I'm hearing that. So it might be something that if you could work with our coordinator on, we would be happy to make those adjustments inside of the administrative module for you so that that PMID is brought over.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll wait another minute to see if more questions come in. And Tim, I'll let you wrap it up whenever. It looks like we're actually up against the time too, as well. Okay.
But if any other questions have come in during the course of finishing up, we will be happy to farm them out to you and answer offline. My email address is listed here. Please do not hesitate to give me a call. We would absolutely love to hear from you. We would absolutely love to visit you and your library to share EDS Discovery Health in a live version and in a formal presentation for you so that you can see how this would apply for your individual library. I hope each and every one of you have a wonderful weekend, and on behalf of the company, thank you for your business and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Tim. And as a reminder, everyone, this is recorded and will be posted on our blog as well as sent out to registrants.